So as you can see in the picture there, I chose that picture very carefully. It shows someone trying to head somewhere, but finding himself or herself at a crossroad. What do you do? Which way will you go? Which way is the correct way to follow? Which one is the correct path to follow? So hence, one needs to be strategic in the direction in which they would like to follow. Right? So you do not just go anyhow, you have to be strategic about that. The introduction, I think I've already done that. And using our college motto, where we say, opening doors to your future, right? It is something that will basically take us through as we go through this presentation. Now, as part of this presentation, I've broken it into three parts. Right? We have what we call the strategic indicators. Then we have the tactical indicators. And lastly, I'll be touching on to the operational indicators. So this presentation will touch on those 3 points. So to start, let's then have a look at our strategic indicators. As part of the strategic indicators, we will basically be looking at the vision of the college, we will be looking at the mission, right? And we'll also be looking at the values statement, right, that the college would like to put out there. So again, like I said, these are my perspective for the college, right? We were not basically taught flexible approach to PQM, right? PQM in vocational education and training, right? Such that we equip young South Africans, right, with the relevant skills in a changing economy, right, for the local market, but having the global environment, right, in mind. Yes, we are training locally, right, but those that we are training can also go, right, on the global stage. So that's basically what my vision is like. In terms of the mission, I am saying that we are aiming to provide quality vocational education, right, to the youth, once again, right, in close partnership with other stakeholders or social partners. Right? The aim there be to actively contribute to the economic growth and social goals of the city, right, or the metro, right, that is locally, before we could go out and fulfill, right, the wishes or the social goals of the country, or to a greater extent even in the world. Understand where is it that we are coming from. So I liked this quote from one of the documents from the Department of Higher Education and Training, which says, although education will not guarantee economic growth, without it, economic growth is not possible, and society will not fulfill its potential. So, as one can tell, right, or can see, it basically goes both ways. Right? So yes, we need education, but at the same time, education does not guarantee us, right, a prosperous future or prosperous life. So in that context, we also discovered that, remember, it is about a historical perspective of TVET. TVET did not just start, right? We have to go back into history where we discovered that vocational education started way back in Europe. Coming from Europe is the dual, right, approach, which actually originates from Germany. Now, when I say dual approach, what am I looking at? Remember the first two modules, the first two models? The first one is a liberal market model. The second one is a state-regulated model. So the dual now is a combination of the two. Right? The state is involved, but not fully. They also want cooperation from the industry. So that's basically the third model. And in this presentation, or part of this strategic plan for the college, we are looking into that direction, where we want to implement a dual approach for vocational education and training at the college. Having said that, yes, it started in Europe, and this is the picture in Europe, but we are on the African continent. How did we get involved? Right? We realized that it is mainly through colonization. Right? When the people from Europe started going around the world looking for, better opportunities or resources, or looking for, markets and things like that. That is where basically colonization came from, and hence by their traveling they carried with them, right, whatever knowledge that they had. This is how basically this industry traveled worldwide. On that note then, let me also maybe, because we are talking about vocational education and industry, this sector or this area has evolved over time. There is what we call the first industrial revolution, the second and the third. Currently we are sitting in the fourth industrial revolution. In some other countries, they are even talking about the fifth industrial revolution. So, as it is commonly known, fourth industrial revolution, I'm more going to expand on that one day. So I'm going to stop it there. So basically, these are the different phases in which vocational education has gone through. When you look at the first industrial revolution, for instance, this is the age of the steam power and mechanization. This is also the age in which people moved from farming the land, from tilling the land, into industrial societies. This is also the age in which urbanization and factory-based companies started taking shape. Then from there, it then moved over to the second industrial revolution. Now there was the widespread use of electricity. Electricity came into play, and then there was also mass production that started taking place. There was also the growth in modern economies, as we more or less know them today. Then it moved from there to the third industrial revolution. This is the age of digitization and automation, the ICT and data processing paradigms, So this is basically when these things basically took off. Now, when it came to the fourth industrial revolution, we are now mainly talking about new technologies. We are talking about advanced digital production. We are talking about the fusion between the physical, the biological, and the digital domain. So just to give you an example there, how do we transform the TVET sector such that it becomes a successful sector, but for just transition? How do we do just that? So here it was also important to bring up the historical background as far as South Africa is concerned. We've spoken about Europe. We touched a little bit about Africa or other continents in terms of colonization, but now let's zoom into South Africa. In terms of South Africa, we know that before 1994, during the apartheid era, yes, in this country, but from my understanding, there was that dual approach in play in the country. But close to 1990, around 1985 or so, when the white government saw that their end was coming closer or near, they started liberalizing the market. So in South Africa, yes, prior to 1994, the system was skewed. It was only favoring certain people. When the ANC government came and took over, definitely they needed to change things around so that the majority of the people could also have access, now not only to education but also to the labor market. Now, as part of bringing in that change, there were a lot of policies that were developed with good intention, but unfortunately, some of those policies did not yield expected result. So, in the end, people on the ground became frustrated. Around 2006 or so, that when slowly now by introducing the FETC Act, right, 16 of 2006, progressively now things started taking shape, right? Then in 2011, right, the National Development Plan came into existence with a vision of 2030. The white paper, right, on post-school education and training, right, also came into existence, right? Now these are visionary, right, documents that we're telling the people in the country that this is where we want TVET to be. This is how we see TVET by 2030. So we are going to rely on some of those policy documents as we go through. The NPP set the National Planning for Post-School Education and Training, Vision 2021 to 2030, also a very important document to us. The QCTO and the TVET all joined forces together for a renewed TVET sector in the country. But on the international stage, there is the UNESCO, United Nations Education, Science, Collaboration Organization, that also put out a number of strategies speaking to the TVET sector. So you have the strategy 2022 to 2029, which identified 3 priorities for TVET. You have the ILO, right, which is the International Labour Organization, which also, right, put out a number of statements or documents still speaking to the TVET sector. And eventually you also had the World Bank, right? 2023 report argues that investing in digital technologies in TVET, right, such as virtual reality training, could enhance the resilience of TVET systems. So this is on the global stage, right? These big organizations, right, are putting out this statement speaking directly to TVET, meaning we cannot really work in isolation or on our own, right? We always have to think about what is also going on out there. The last author, right, or authors, Young and Young, further stated that societies require not only digital or technological skills, but also collaboration, also civic competencies, also social and emotional skills, also creativity and a sense of global solidarity. In other words, all these competencies form what we now call the 21st century skills set, or the skills, right, of the 4th IR. So not only are they looking for digitalization, right, in the people, but they are also looking at all these other soft skills, we call them. Moving from there, we started speaking about these big organizations on the international stage, right? So came in the United Nations, right, Sustainable Development Goals. As we've said, that one cannot really speak about real meaningful development, be it in a metro, be it in a city, whilst there is extreme poverty, right, in the city. So what that said, we are then brought, looking at all these SDGs, we are then brought on the international stage where some of the issues that are affecting the most people around the world have sort of like been identified. And they are referred to as global trends or international trends. So what do they mean by global trend or international trends? Basically, these are challenges that are being experienced worldwide, right? With the potential, right, of affecting local context in the medium to long term in the form of risks and uncertainties. So people around the world are experiencing challenges, right? But there are certain challenges which pose the risk or which are challenging, right, in such a way that they pose a risk, right, and uncertainty to the people. And amongst those international or global trends, some of them we identified there, like aging world or aging population. We may not necessarily be badly affected in Africa, but this is a reality in other continents. You go to Europe, right, you go to Canada, to some other countries, that they are experiencing this issue, where there are no young people anymore available to take over. Right? The majority of the population there is basically grown up. You have a labor shift market. Right? So basically, the market is shifted. It is no longer what it used to be, how we used to know it. So there has been a shift in the labor market. Skills mismatch is also another point. But nowadays, we're talking about digitization. People are studying, and then at the end of it, they receive a certificate. When they are out there, they realize that, what they can offer differ completely from what is expected in the labor market. So that is your skills mismatch, and so on and so forth. Right? So some of the points are highlighted there. Now, what I was basically saying is that yes, I spoke a little bit about 4IR and how this is affecting the world over. Even us here, we are somehow affected. Today, we are starting to talk about online teaching, right? Blended learning. Now, this is all as a result of what? 4IR and the digitization process that is taking place. Another reality is the mushrooming of large informal settlements, right? Especially around, right, in our case, campuses. People through pension. And that puts a lot of pressure, right, on the fiscal, right, or the fiscus, right, of every government. So these are some of the realities. Now, to zoom into these realities, one retired professor, Professor Beckman, right, from the University of Pretoria, through all these global trends, has identified 6, and he actually referred to them as mega trends. So these are challenges that, in one or another, right, if you do not plan accordingly, right, without looking at them, somewhere down the line, you will find yourself in trouble. Right? So hence, we're looking at rising inequalities, unfavorable demographics. You're looking at resource scarcity. You're looking at climate change, which is a reality. Not so long ago, right? Here, about 2-3 weeks ago, we've experienced snow, right, for 2-3 days. Something that has never happened before. So, yes, climate change is a reality, it is here. Right? Geopolitical rebalancing. Right? We know that story about the West, the East. Right? Now they're talking about the BRICS and so on and so forth. So countries around the world are trying to reposition themselves. Right? And then indebtedness and fiscal issues are touched on these fiscal issues a short while ago. Now we get to the dual approach now in Germany. We've touched on the history of vocational education, right? We saw all the various issues, right, that affected our local context, right? We spoke a little bit about what the apartheid era offered us and why the government had to step in to try and redress, right, everything that was previously set. So now, let's zoom into the dual approach. As we said, right, there is a combination, a little bit of state involvement as well as industry involvement. So there is cooperation. And on that note then, I want to zoom into this picture here that you have. We'll go from grade 10 all the way to grade 12. But even there too, there is a connection to the dual system after grade 12, or they can then join the higher education institutions. Right? In our case, universities and previously technicals. Then from there, right, through that dual system, they then emerge and go on to the labor market. As you can see, all three of them are pointing towards the labor market. Now, what are the benefits of the dual approach? We've identified 5 of them. The first one being highly skilled workers. Right? This is one benefit of the dual approach. Number 2, there is alternation between theory and practicals. Right? So people don't just go and learn theory, right, and then wait for some practicals in another year or when it comes. Right? So there is a combination of the two. Right? You go to the college for a number of days, and then you also go in industry. Right? And what we discovered there is that in Germany, for instance, for as far as this dual system is concerned, right, it goes as far as 25% at the college and 75% in industry. They call it 25-75, right? So you can see it's almost 1/4 of the time you are at the college and 3/4 of the time you should be in industry. But if you reflect, right, this is how it used to be, right, even in the country here, years ago. Right, people would be sent to colleges for 3 months, right, especially for the trimester course. They would be sent to colleges for 3 months, and the 9 months would be spent in industry. Right, it was based on this model. We have synchronization of practical theory. Yes, whatever we learn in class, we are also able to practice it, right? To implement it, to reflect on it, right? There is also coordination and cooperation, right? As I said, the state, right, is in mesh cooperating with industry in order to make this system here work. And lastly, there is a regulation of contract via, regulation of training rather via contract. Again, this is how it used to be back in the days. Right? Students would come to the college not of their own. They would be sent via companies. So the colleges that, or yes, the education sector at that time would be then in contract, in some of arrangement, right, with industry, not directly with the student. Right? So that is also another plus for as far as this dual system is concerned. But now let's come locally. Right? What is going on currently in South Africa? We've got an idea of what the dual system looks like, right? What it represents, right? Then let's move over to the country and see. When you come to the country, right? The reason why I emphasize that drawing there so that it sticks with you. And when I start talking about this one here, right, you will maybe be able to agree with me. When I look at this here, the first thing that strikes my eyes is that I can only see mainly education sector that is. I can see the involvement of the TVET, and then that's about it. I do not see labor, I do not see anything of that sort. So, as opposed to the dual system as it is currently being implemented in Germany, with us, I can say that our system is broken. In the sense that whatever is happening at the college, as you can see it here, Whatever is happening at the college, right, is in what? In a closed cycle. Industry does not know about it. Right? It's the college, the CET colleges, right? QCTO, as well as TVET. That those people, to some extent, are talking to one another, but they are not really talking to industry. It's a closed system. Right? You cannot see the labor anywhere here. Then the other issue is that the cost of running education in the country keeps on going up year on year. Right? We need more resources, financial resources. That is another characteristic of our system. And this is putting pressure on the fiscus, right? On government. It's putting more pressure on government because it is government which is basically funding all these colleges, all these institutions, even only taking about 20% of that budget. That is how much money is coming to the colleges. And yet, right, you can also see a breakdown for as far as money, right, allocated to the CET is concerned. But let's move away from that. Our next slide, basically taking the cue from the previous one, right? One can see from that slide there, right, on your far left-hand side, that the distribution or the allocation of funds for as far as TVET colleges are concerned. Right? As you can see, this is 2020 data, right? 2020 data, right? Southwest TVET College, right? In 2020, right, from government claimed about 325 million as budget, running budget for the college, right? But when I check by then 2020, 2022, 2023, somewhere around there, our college was only sitting around 193, 196 million. Right? This college already, right, Southwest in the Western Cape was double, right, what we basically claiming for, 325. Closely followed by Majuba. Right? When I say closely, right, 325 Majuba, 237. It's about 100 million difference, which is a lot. Right? Which is quite a lot. Right? And the third college, right, to have received a lot of money, right, a chunk of that money from the government is Capricorn TVET College. Right, with a total amount of plus minus 212 million. Right, the fourth one was Ekurhuleni, right, in Gauteng, with about 209 million. Right, so Tekwini is not yet anywhere here. Then we move to the center, right, and right-hand side of your screen there. Right, what do you see? On the previous slide there, as I told you, right, to me, it looks like a broken system. Unlike what we saw, right, with a dual system, you've got labor, you've got education, all the different institutions, they show you the correlation, the link, right, basically between all the different parts of the system. But when you look at this one here, right, as I said, we are basically in isolation, right? We are in a closed cycle. Then, when we get to this one here now, I want to pinpoint the NYDA, National Youth Development Agency, right? If you read some of its functions, right, amongst others, it is to what? To also find placement for the young people in industry. Remember I told you broken system? Right? When you look at the PYEI, that is the Presidential Youth Employment Initiative. So we've got the NYDA, which is also seeking, right, for placement. We've got the presidency, also involved in seeking, right, placement for the youth. Once again, one can see that, different departments are not talking to each other, right? Everyone is working in silos, right? So hence, I said our system is a broken system. That then translates into the labor market, to some of these realities. So the number of people that are unemployed is almost the same as the number of people that are working. And that puts a lot of pressure on the fiscus. Right. Now, having understood all these issues, we are now going to zoom into our strategic plan now. So as you can see, you cannot plan in isolation. But it is important that you understand what is going on the global stage. You need to understand what are the mega trends that are influencing things out there before you actually come in on your local context. So a combination of all those three points there, your international or global trends, your mega trend, as well as your local context, is what, if put together, will produce a strategic plan for the college. So that you plan taking into account every single area. Right? So this is what you're looking at. And at the moment, as you know, there is a push from the QCTO to implement its occupational programs, and it seems as if there is agreement in the country to go the QCTO way. And as I said it earlier on, the QCTO way actually speaks more about what? There is a little bit of theory taking place in the classroom, but that must be linked directly to some practicals. You cannot have one without the other. Hence, you can see now there is that duplication, theory and practical. And this, as you can also tell, sort of like mimics the dual approach, in a way that what the QCTO as a branch of government, in order for you to get placement, you need to speak to industry. So there will that collaboration that will have to take place for the implementation of the QCTO occupational program. So hence we are going towards what you call it, the dual approach. Now, all that we have covered thus far, only spoke about the strategic indicators. Now, we are moving over to the tactical indicators. So here, I liked what the OECD spoke about there. So basically, this organization basically said that effective and capable lecturers or facilitators are those who have a combination of three things. Number one, they need to have academic knowledge. Number two, they need to have industry experience. Number three, they also need to have pedagogical skills, the method. So a combination of those three. I can pause here and we can have a discussion for a whole day on issues that are actually affecting us as a college. But I know within this college here, we've got people who are not academically qualified, but they have been with us for a very long time. So how do you then expect the college to be effective? How do you then expect the sector to be effective? Like the OECD said, you need a combination of those three elements. So we therefore need to reflect on ourselves and do like recently what the HR called a skills audit, so that we understand who has what and what can we do for those people. Then, with that understanding, I then went over to the goals. What are my goals? right, through this strategic plan for the college. I've identified a number of issues, but the list is not exhaustive. Right? Point number one, we need to finalize the upskilling of lecturing staff, academic, as well as what? Pedagogy. I had to put academic there because at the moment the focus is more, right, pedagogy. That's the method. But they are all being sent out to complete their TVET qualification. That is mostly pedagogy. Like I said, some of our lecturers do not have the requisite academic qualifications. They've studied up to a certain point, maybe during those days, because they were bright, they were clever, and quickly the college absorbed them. And since then, they were stuck in the system. They were unable to go and pursue their studies. So, yes, I acknowledge the fact that the college is currently involved in that upskilling process, but we also need to try and finalize it. Introduce occupational qualifications at the college, right? And I'm looking at 2026 onwards. Prepare workshop capable staff for QCTO practical component implementation. So basically, what do I mean by capable workshop capable staff? Not every single lecturer can be sent out there, number one, for upskilling or reskilling, for the purpose of sitting in the workshop. So at campuses, levels, we need to identify those critical staff that can be placed in the workshop sort of like on a permanent basis. And those are the people that needs to be given priority in terms of industry experience, WBE. So hence I need prepare workshop capable staff. Seek, sign and review MOUs as well as SLAs. With industry partners for WIN, which is your work integrated learning, as well as your WBE, work-based exposure or experience for students as well as for lecturers. This is a very important and critical part of the implementation of the dual approach within the college. One needs also to think of improving the college ICT infrastructure. As long as our ICT infrastructure is not at the level needed or required, we will be lagging behind. And that is in terms of what? The LMS implementation as well as the blended learning. Let me pause there. I think just yesterday was it, or the day before yesterday, that I was having a conversation with Mr. Long about this new dongle and SIM card that are being issued to the lecturers. And part of the document that they need to sign, I saw the issue of LMS was raised as well as the issue of blended learning. Such that when they are taking, they are committing themselves to using those gadgets and the data in there for the implementation of both the blended learning as well as the LMS, which was a plus for me. Because prior to this, there was nothing written, black and white, where lecturers could be committed to, in terms of moving towards the LMS and the blended learning way. The College Campus OHS Act, or OSHACT, as some people would put it, compliance certificates are overdue. This is a reality. Unfortunately, up to now, it seems as if the college hasn't been able to resolve this issue. Yet, when it comes to the implementation of the QCTO programs, this is one of the requirements. So, hence I said it is overdue, but would look towards 2025 to try and finalize that process. But then there is the planned phase out of report 191, be it engineering, business, as well as the NCV, by the year 2027. But as you can see there, there is a gray area around that one. QCTO, government to some extent, want us to replace all our courses with the occupational program. But there is a gray area, especially when it comes to the issues of funding and how we are going to run. Then the action plan, like I said, we need to reskill, year-marked workshop lecturers through WBE, but in phases, because HR is not occupational programs. Yes, in the far end or in the long term, so to speak, we want to run occupational program. But as I said, there is a great area. And because it was not done before, on a larger scale, so the college does not yet know how this will play out. So as a result, it's better to start with the skills programs, see how it plays out before we go fully towards occupational program. Now this is another very interesting point, formulate college policy on blended learning, LMS, and digital integration. As I said, on that document there, yes, it is mentioned. And every single lecturer that will be collecting that new gadget is committing to employing themselves for the implementation of the LMS as well as blended learning. But it needs to be formulated through a policy. Transform one campus into a business hub or incubator. This is very, very important, especially when we start talking about a third income stream. At the moment, our budget or the bulk of our funding is coming directly from DA. But we also need to start thinking of a third income stream. And one way of doing that is by transforming one campus into a business hub or incubator. But for entrepreneurial undertakings and student practical training, we may also find ourselves, because our economy is not growing at the rate that is expected, we may find ourselves in that problem where we've got learners, but we will nowhere else to place them. Or all industries with which we are in partnership are unable to absorb those learners. So what do? If we run a business hub or an incubator, it is possible to use it as a training ground, but for all our learners. So this is something to look into. Consultation also needs to be done between the labor and the college as well as the students, the lecturers, so as to have the buy-in. Appoint a service provider for setting up QCTO accredited workshops at campuses. For as much as we can say, we've got lecturers who are experienced, but the question is, solution to that is to get service providers who can come in and set our own workshop up while we are getting our people upskilled or reskilled. There are so many other practical indicators that one could have looked at, like your academic performance, your lecturer performance and development, and so on and so forth. Of late, there is now talk about well-being, safety and well-being. Well-being is becoming a big thing out there. It is an area that we also need to look at. Both the well-being of staff as well as of learners. Then, after our tactical indicators, we are moving towards the end now, our operational indicators. As part of our operational indicators, the main one that we are looking at there is the resources, college resources. The first resource is financial in terms of the budget, which will then allow us to be able to do these other things. even though I did not really mention it there, but you will see it on your right-hand side screen there, that I have put that a number of postings, right, just to guide us in as far as implementation of some of the goals, right, and the plans are concerned. Right? Yes, within the college, we have the infrastructure, right, in terms of the building, right, at different campuses, so that we are able to implement the dual approach. Right? So the infrastructure is not really a problem, that both in terms of classroom, workshops, labs, simulation rooms, offices, right, enough land for possible expansion, but all are resources within the college. Right? I spoke about upgrading, right, or improving the college ICT and LMS capabilities for technology expansion. Right? Then you have compatibility of college equipment, right, and other assets for implementation of QCTO. Basically what I mean there is that we cannot buy everything from scratch. Right? We need to do an inventory and see what is it that we have and what is it that we still need to have, right? So that we minimize the cost, right, on the college. Right? We may also need additional cars, right, within the college. I remember a few years ago back, maybe 10 years or so, we used to have a bus at the college. But if we transform one campus into a business hub, students from other campuses may be from time to time required to go to that one campus for their practicals. How are we going to achieve that? So at the moment, we might just have to outsource. But if we have additional cars, if we have a bus, that would just come in handy. But in terms of the cost structure, these are estimates. Don't be too harsh with me, colleagues. These are just rough estimates to give us more or less an idea. Right? In terms of the college budget, as I said about two years ago, right? Yes, we were plus minus around 193, 196 million. Right? So, in order for us to float comfortably, I reckon 205 million, right, is more or less what we require within the college. But we need to upgrade our ICT infrastructure. The tag price there is plus minus 800,000. But we need to have motor workshop, but completely safe for also of the student as well as our equipment. So I'm looking at plus minus a price tag of 8 million. Right? It may seem a lot, but it's actually not so much. Right? Looking at the sizes of those campuses. Staff training and workshops, right? I'm looking at a price tag of plus minus 600,000. Obviously, this could be on a yearly basis. Right? I know it could be a bit too much there. In closing, right, I'm looking at the risk assessment now. Right? And then mitigating factors. In terms of the risk assessment, I've identified three main areas. Right? The college finances as well as the budget. If we do not have the requisite monies, right, then we basically are planning for failure, right? Because we don't have the resources, right? So new funding norms for occupational programs, as I was hinted to it earlier on, is a problem, right? So nobody yet knows exactly what will happen. That uncertainty on long-term viability of our current programs. Right? Yes, we were told 2027. How do we train ourselves? And what is going to happen? Right? And with the current, staff that we have, what is going to happen? So there are so many questions there. Slow growth in the economy versus industry partnership for alternative funding. I spoke about the third stream income. Right? Key appointments. Right? So here, for a very long time, we were told about, getting a DP innovation. Right? I think that is still in the making. Right? Risk, right, is also another key area where appointments are still to be made at the college. And then I also mentioned the TVET risk. One, for as much as we have Mr. Amo, of which we are grateful, right, for all the work that he is doing, but he is a single man office. And that cannot happen, right, within a big college like TVET. But we definitely need to have more manpower, right, in that office to capacitate it. But remember, Mr. Amo is a human being like you and me. What happens when he's sick tomorrow? Right? Does the college come to a standstill? Because what he is currently doing, seemingly, is the only one that can really do those things. So, something to think about. That for as far as our internal factors are concerned when it comes to safety and health. But in this case here, more safety. We've got people coming in and out of campuses where they are not properly recorded. Maybe staff is, but when it comes to students, because they do not have student cards, so that poses a problem. Also, when it comes to visitors, we also need to look into having visitors cards, such that they are properly identified, if needs be searched before they actually come into the premises. External factors, we're looking at access point for the various campuses, particularly for Springfield, Cato, and to some extent even Melbourne. Right? Why? Because we've got informal settlement, we've got hostels within the proximity of those campuses. Illegal dumping and air pollution. This is a serious problem, especially for this campus here, where at times lecturers will complain they are unable to teach, students will also complain they are unable to cope because of all the smoke that we get from the rubbish that is being burnt out there. But then we have another external factor, political power struggles. We know of late about the GNU, the MKP, and what instabilities those two have the potential to bring, not only in the province, but also for as far as the country is concerned. Then at that point, whatever you planned or you intended on doing basically fall off, especially when there is a change of government. This is a very important area to look into in terms of planning. Mitigating factors, as I said, sourcing out a third stream income for the college is very, very important. At the moment, we are mainly working with the cities, for which we are quite grateful, but that is not enough. So, good people, as I told you when we first started, this presentation was broken into three main points. Our strategic indicators, our tactical indicators, as well as our operational indicators. But mainly in terms of the implementation of this dual approach, as we have seen, when you look at the model in Germany, it is well coordinated. But when we come to South Africa, it is broken. So yes, that is as a result of politics. Whatever happened prior to 1994, the government had to step in and basically control everything. But unfortunately, we are still at that stage. And where, sort of like in France, we have this state regulated and bureaucracy kind of model. But slowly, with the implementation of the QCTO, we are starting to move progressively towards the dual approach. Yes, the dual approach is doable in this country, provided that we get our ducks in a row. In your mind, maybe you think of the cities, you think of end of this presentation, right, where we are saying yes, the dual approach is doable in South Africa, it is doable at Tekwini College, provided that we do get certain